Hey everyone, I'm Steven with Scenes in Nature, and today I'm going to show you how to add a water feature to this duck base. Now, I actually made this duck base, and I started with just a piece of plywood and 2x4 cut kind of in a regular shape. Next, I went ahead and used our contour sheet, put it on there, stapled it, shaped it the way I wanted it to be shaped. Now, the big thing there is make sure that it's watertight, and then when you put a plaster in there, it's going to lock it in and turn it into a nice hard shell. And that's really going to, that bowl shape is where we're going to be able to put our water. So after that, I was able to color it with the rock color system. And then I added the moss effect with the soil base, as well as some of the highlights and accents. And then I added just some leaves and some sticks, just for some more realism. So now we're ready to go ahead and start mixing my water resin and adding that murky tint in there to get this poured in this base. All right guys, so now we're ready to go ahead and mix up our water resin and get it poured into our cavity. So what I've done is I took my water base and my water activator, and I actually put them in a gallon bag and put them in hot water. I'm doing this because we're mixing less than 12 ounces, and so it helps to heat it up so that it'll kick better when it gets in the cavity. So we're just gonna go ahead and pour this in up to the amount that we need. And you'll notice these are two different viscosities. So what's gonna happen when I go to mix this activator is gonna kind of set up on the surface of the water base, and so we're really got to get that mixed in well. So one thing you want to make sure is when you're mixing, you want to make sure you scrape the edges, get it mixed in really nice, and you don't want to create a bunch of bubbles, so you want to mix nice and slow. All right, so now I've got this good mixed up where it's a nice consistent look all the way through. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my tint in. With this tint, one thing you wanna do is make sure you shake it up really well. Just gonna go ahead and start by adding a drop in there. That's one, we're gonna go ahead and two, we're gonna do three, and I'm gonna go ahead and stop there and get this mixed up so I can really look and see what this looks like, because it is so concentrated. And I wanna make sure that I don't cover up all that hard work that I put in into that base. Again, it's going to kind of go to the edges, so you want to make sure you get that pulled off the edges. So obviously with this, I'm going to want a few more drops. So I only put 3 in there. I'm going to add a couple more drops, and then we'll mix this in and see kind of where we're at. And again, we have 10 minutes of mixing it, so that 10 minutes counts into this adding the tint in there. Again, we're trying not to create a whole bunch of air bubbles as we're mixing. All right, so this is at 5 drops. I think I'm gonna add at least one more to it, and then I think we're ready to pour, because I wanna leave it fairly transparent, because I wanna see all this stuff that I put in the bottom. So I don't wanna add too much tint into this one. And so I'm just gonna add one more drop into it. You know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do 2 more. And I think that's gonna be just about perfect for what I'm after. Now this one doing this does take just a little bit of practice. You know, you can play around with the tint with water as well, just to kind of see what it'll do, so you have a good idea of how that tint's gonna react with how much the water resin you put in there. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Now you wanna pour nice and slow. You don't wanna just dump it in there really fast. And so I'm just gonna try to pour this nice and slow. Let that kind of creep in and around everything. By pouring it slow, it's also going to keep from creating so many bubbles when it splashes down in there. And we're just going to kind of fill this up. That's really looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And it's got enough murky color in it that still looks dirty and all that, but I can see down in the bottom. I can see the bottom on it, which I really want. I think that's a great realistic look. And so I think from here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get this covered up. So I like to use foil, put over the top of it. That way no dust can get into it. It also keeps the AC from blowing on it, causing any issues. And then I'll just check back periodically to make sure that there's no bubbles forming or anything. If there are some, I can get them out of there. And then we're just gonna let this dry overnight. Then tomorrow I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna show you how to make a really cool, gentle kind of surface water, just subtle movement on top of this after this gets good and hard. All right guys, so it's been about 48 hours and I'm ready to move on to the next step. But before I do that, I want to kind of tell you a couple things. So One thing is I did check this about every hour for the first 4 hours just to make sure I didn't have any air bubbles. And in this case, I didn't have any. But if you do have some air bubbles in that first 4 hours or so, you can take some 70% ISO alcohol and just spray it on there, just not a whole lot, doesn't take much, and it'll get those bubbles to come up to the surface. You know, the other thing is, I personally like to wait at least 24 hours minimum before I move on to this step, but 48 is even better. This stuff does cure a little bit slower than what you may be used to, but by curing slow, it's gonna allow all those bubbles to escape, and it's also it's not gonna get so hot and so fast that you have all those cracking issues and some of those things. And so that is intentional. So just let it get nice and hard before you move on to adding surface water. And so we'll go ahead and get started here. So it's super important, always wear your safety glasses. These are gonna protect your eyes from that UV light. And so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put a little bit out here, and then set that aside, and we're gonna use this resin knife, and we're just gonna kind of manipulate this surface. And if you notice, like right now, it's really kind of thin. I can just do a quick flash over it, and that'll just kind of thicken it up just a little bit so I can get a little bit more movement on it and keep it from self-leveling so quick. And then after I get where I like it, I just kind of flash freeze that in place. And then that'll stay there. And then just keep repeating that process until I get all this surface covered. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you do want to work in small areas, because if you don't have it all the texture that you want, if this light shines on it, it is going to instantly cure it. So you want to make sure you're working in small enough areas that you're not wasting a bunch of your UV resin. Now this UV light's going to continue to cure that UV resin, and so I'm going to hold it on there just a little bit to make sure I take all that stickiness out of it, because it'll be a little sticky if it's not cured all the way. All right guys, so it's that easy to be able to add water to a duck base. And of course you can do this for any kind of base. And so if you would, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And of course, for more product knowledge, go to scenesinature.com. Thanks so much for watching.